What is up, everyone? Brandon Ferst, aka First Report, representing the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. Welcome in to the 2025 premiere, if you will, of the In the Paint podcast here on the network. We break down everything men's college basketball has to offer, and of course, with me as always, it's my friend and co-host, Raider Jim Martinez. You can find Mr. Martinez at Raider Jim 1090. How you doing tonight, sir?
Hey, I'm doing well. Sun's out. It's like you said, chilly in the morning, and then we get down to about, we're up to about 75, 77 degrees in my neighborhood. So I'm just happy as a clam.
Yeah. Prayers to all our East Coast listeners who just rolled their eyes and shook their fists at us. But again, as my buddy used to say, when I asked him how the weather was, he would say it's expensive. We do pay for that sunshine tax here, unfortunately. But
there you go.
We're definitely getting that vitamin D payoff lately. But as I kind of alluded to, obviously, our focus has been on the NFL. And with that done and dusted, go Birds, we're kind of switched our attention now to college basketball. And I'll be completely honest, last year I was a lot more dialed in at this point in the season, and a lot of that is, I hate to keep bringing them up, but the Eagles, and the Eagles run all the way to the Super Bowl. It's very difficult throughout the week for me to kind of focus on anything else, but I will say, if there was one weekend to get in or back into college ball fully, for me, it was a great weekend. We saw 1 versus 2, which didn't really live up to the billing in Auburn, Alabama. And then there were a couple other really interesting games. I was kind of hoping Boise State would put up more of a fight against San Diego State. We'll get to that momentarily. But we are going to kind of start getting our thoughts together as we inch closer. I think we're 6 weeks away, or we will be 6 weeks away from this Sunday being Selection Sunday. So time to focus up the current top 10 in the AP. And it's very interesting. If you were to just look at this by conference, you would think this is a football top 10, because the SEC is having a year, folks. But Auburn at the top, as I mentioned, they did take down Alabama this past weekend on the road. A huge 1 versus 2 matchup. Auburn 22-3. I think they are head and shoulders above the rest right now. Florida, number 2, 23-3. Duke also 23-3. They are the number 3 team in the country. Aforementioned Alabama, who unfortunately lost to Missouri last night, so they will probably tumble down even further, but they are 21-4. Houston 22-4. Tennessee 21-5. Texas A&M 20-6. Iowa State 21-5. Texas Tech 20-6. And St. John's 22-4, number 10 in the country. Raider Jim, your thoughts on really the top 10 and any other thoughts you've had kind of throughout the year?
Yeah, top 10. When the last buzzer went down on Sunday afternoon, we completed 16 weeks of the season. After 16 weeks, there had only been 3 different number 1 teams in that 16 weeks. Kansas had it won in the first 6 weeks. Then Tennessee took over from weeks 7 through 10, and Auburn has just been sitting at the top for the last, weeks 12 through 16, and they do seem to be the guys to beat. But watch out for Florida. They are playing good. They're playing consistent, and they have slowly but surely just kind of like almost under the radar, but not really with a record like that. But they really, 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 they're getting a lot of attention right now. Houston also at 22-4. I like the way that they're playing. And watch out for Iowa State. They have been in the mix almost the entire year. I'm looking here at my spreadsheet. And yeah, Iowa State has been there since week 1. They were at number 5 at week 1. And they have just kind of like hung around in that. That's one of those teams that when you're playing that consistent, you better watch out. If you want to call anybody a long shot or out of the top 10 teams, I would tell you it's St. John's, but I don't even think St. John's is a long shot. And we'll get to talking about that game as we go along with the recording here. But boy, they got a big one coming up on Sunday, and it's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's kind of opposite of last year. I want to say I felt like it was we were juggling number one teams, and
Yes,
it's kind of ironic because while we were juggling number one teams, no matter what, the question in our mind was, yeah, but can they beat UConn? And we ended up getting the answer to all of that. But this year, in a way, I do feel is more wide open, but not, because I do, like I said, I think Auburn is head and shoulders, at least from what I've seen, above everybody else. Obviously, in a 40-minute game, or in one game, one and done tournament, anything can happen. I guess the one question I would have is the SEC gauntlet. Does that kind of, and Auburn is kind of, and Florida, I mean, they have pretty much the same record. Is that gauntlet going to be detrimental to some of these teams going down the stretch? And obviously it's probably a little too early to be talking, real nuts and bolts of the tournament. But again, I mean, you're talking about when Auburn plays in their Sweet 16 or Elite 8, assuming they get that far, and I think that's a safe assumption. I mean, they're probably going to be looking at, we played 15 or 16 tournament teams, and that can definitely be an advantage. But at the same time, that can also wear you down, especially in a one and done situation. And I do wonder if for all the SEC teams, not just Auburn, because everybody's got to play this schedule. Very, very impressed overall. You do kind of in the back of your mind go, this is really cool, but no trophies are handed out in February right now. And the SEC as a conference wants one of their teams to be given the trophy in April. So, nothing really you can do about it. You can't, call 6 teams up and go, hey, you need to settle down. But it is very interesting. And especially because if you would have said, look, I'm old enough to remember when the top conference in college basketball, it was almost like you didn't even look at the rosters or anything. You just said the ACC, because you knew Duke, North Carolina, and then either Wake Forest or NC State or both were going to be up there. And then they would throw in, Pittsburgh's and the Virginias and things like that. But now it does definitely at the moment seem like the SEC is kind of at the top. Well, definitely at the top of the heap, at least as a conference, but a lot to kind of break down in these final 6 weeks, because again, this isn't the final top 10 doesn't really matter. This isn't the BCS, or this isn't the college football playoff. Look, if you're in the top 10, you're not worried about anything other than seeding. You are firmly in. All of these teams are in the tournament, even if they lose out for the most part, which won't happen, but all of these teams are firmly safe. But it is interesting to kind of see the shift, and we will see if that kind of continues going forward down to the SEC, out of the Midwest, because it's been the Big 12 and the Big 10 the past few years that have been the big kind of bullies overall as a conference. But leading into the next question, obviously, we have UConn, who is back-to-back national champions, and barring a incredible run this year, we will not see them three-peat. So we're not going to see a three-peat at all, it looks like, this year. But Danny Hurley has been, he is one of the obviously most talked about coaches in college basketball. And I kind of wrote it down here on the sheet. And it's pretty much this simple. Dan Hurley is truly embracing the villain role. And the question, is it getting a bit too much? So Raider Jim, I'll let you have the first bite at this apple. Danny Hurley and his gimmick, or whatever you want to call it, fan or not?
Yeah, this isn't pro wrestling, and unfortunately it kind of takes that approach with him. Now, trying to be real fair to the man. Obviously he's good. Obviously he knows what he's doing. How much of this is byproduct of, and it's a small percentage, but how much of this does the portal come into play? He's got to be very, very careful, because he can lose kids and gain kids. It's very easy either direction. He has already come out and said this week that he feels many of his players have already checked out for the season, because they figure out, what, they're 18-8 or whatever it is, and they've been beaten already, and now they got to go play St. John's. So I don't know, is that him posturing the press and the fan base for, does he already figure that they're not going to beat St. John's on Sunday? Maybe, I don't know. As the head coach, or as a coach in general, I think you really need to be a leader, and a leader with character. And I, from personal experience with family members and myself, I have nothing but respect and understanding for the trials of alcoholism, the trials of struggling with depression. And I know each one of those can impact an individual. Everybody's going to be impacted differently by those things. And is he overcompensating for some of the challenges he's had? Now he's starting the book tour already, announcing that he is, I'm doing a tell-all about all the things I've had to deal with in my life. And there is nothing wrong with that. But Coach Hurley, nobody's ever going to mistake you for Jim Valvano.
Yeah.
That's for darn sure. And part of that is because maybe you've won it twice. Maybe Valvano had to fight with the ragtag bunch that he had down there at NC State. But I'll tell you what, that was a man who was a coach and was a leader, and had nothing but character. Is it too much? Yeah. They had that game against Butler a few weeks back, and his whole thing is, not just the game. The big thing that comes out of that, or one of the highlights of that, is him telling the referee, don't you turn your back on me. I'm the best effing coach in the sport. Wow. Really? So is that what you're also instilling in your players? And what are you going to do when one of your top guys, when one of your seniors turns around and looks at you and says, dude, I'm going to be making more than you ever dreamed of next year when I get drafted. Don't you talk to me like that. I'm the best effing kid on your team. I mean, watch what you reap, because you will sow it in return. And I think, like I say, I have nothing but I can give him the benefit of the doubt on many ways and many avenues, but somebody needs to put him in check.
Yeah,
like the AD needs to step in and go, hey, bub, you're an extension of us.
And you do wonder if maybe the power that he's been given is too much, because I do feel like, obviously, back-to-back national championships does insulate you from some criticism, or at least worry about job security, however you want to talk about it, at least internally. What the other people say and what we say, honestly, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. But you're right. Like, if the athletic director has to be, or whatever, these days with the transfer portal, and now teams are naming general managers, I don't even know who's in charge of these programs above the coaches. So whoever that person is, I mean, it used to be the athletic director. So whoever that person is, it's got to be kind of getting to the point, because you brought it up and it was exactly what I was going to start with. I was a huge fan of professional wrestling. The Rock, Stone Cold, stuff like that. And this is a heel. This is, that's exactly what a, Bam Bam Bigelow, or, some other villain or heel, if you will, would say to a referee, right, in a match, to get you to not like him. So it's, on one end, I laugh about it, but on the other, once you kind of dive deeper into it, as you said, that he's not a professional coach, and obviously these kids are getting paid. But they're still impressionable. And the biggest thing I do think in recruiting is parents looking another man in the eye and essentially saying, for 4 years, and I know transfer portals messed that up, but just for the sake of it, for 4 years, you are in charge of my child for essentially half of the year. There has to be an amount of trust there. And I guarantee you there are going to be some households, not all, but there are going to be some households that either don't even take a meeting because they don't want to deal with this man, or maybe will meet Danny Hurley, and Danny Hurley will do the salesman part of it, and they'll kind of look at it like, wait, aren't you supposed to be this villain? Oh, well, it's just a gimmick, blah, blah, blah. And that's where the other questions come in. Now, one thing I will say, and I don't really think this is an excuse, it's more of context. And I do bring this up a lot when it comes to Danny Hurley. The Hurley family is very, very successful and very, very good basketball wise, but it is this is the Hurley household. And at least from what I've read the book, I believe it was John Feinstein. It was Miracle at St. Anthony. It was essentially about, I believe it's Bobby Hurley, Bobby Hurley Sr. He was, high school Hall of Fame coach, incredible coach at a very small Catholic school. But just reading it, there is an intensity that he has with his kids, and it never really gets personal about their, home life. But, you can put two and two together. If he is this, commanding of his kids on his team, you have to imagine he's that commanding in the household. And once again, these are very successful. And if the worst thing you can say about Danny Hurley is he's an a-hole, that's in sports, that's a B+. So, I do believe it is a little too much, especially when you are talking about a head coach of 18 to 22-year-old men, or at least becoming men, however you want to classify that. But I do, again, there always needs to be that context of, it worked in his household. And so right now, and I know obviously it doesn't look like they're going to win 3, but he's been very successful wherever he's gone. So, sure. Although I do think this year it's taken up to a whole nother level. And I do wonder if it is the ego, because I think that's the other part of it that's playing into it. We weren't seeing this 3 years ago. He was a little more soft-spoken, which I guess you could understand, but 2 championships will change you. And I just don't think it's a good look, and it sounds like Raider Jim agrees, but we'll see. And I don't think it's going to end anytime soon.
Because the swagger and the bravado, it's great when you're winning.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When that starts going by the wayside, guess what? Then you're just a bag of hot air.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess at that point, maybe he's going to run for the White House. Anyway, I told myself I wouldn't do that kind of stuff, but I just did.
I mean, that's a hell of a pay cut, but yeah, that would be crazy. That's actually, my mind's wandering on all kinds of comedy sketches you could have on that. But yeah, I think from the outside we can laugh at it, and maybe not laugh at it, but just kind of, take a little bit of the fun of it. But hopefully it doesn't start to turn into a tougher situation where it gets a little more scandalous, if you will. But moving on, as we get deeper into this big episode, as we kind of, like I said, set the table for the run into the tournament. This year, obviously, it's been, as we kind of said, chalk, at least when it comes to the top 10 and stuff like that. Not a ton of movement, but big question as we, dive into the final 6 weeks. So far, who has been your biggest surprise and disappointment? Raider Jim, I'll give you your first thoughts on this one.
Well, after 6 weeks of starting out the season, the first 6 weeks and being number 1, Kansas, what the heck? They're losing stock. Their stock value is dropping real fast, and it's not going to get any easier. I think they're 6th place in the conference right now. Again, Iowa State. Obviously, somebody knew something I didn't know, because they started the season with a great rating and they're still there. To me, that's a little bit of a surprise, and doesn't bother me one way or the other. But yeah, that's a surprise for me. Other one is nice to see Wisconsin and Michigan doing what they're doing. It's good to see Michigan back up there, and they're making they're covering a lot of ground over the last few weeks. I think they jumped up 8 spots since the last week's ranking. So good for them. And then as far as, disappointment, if you will, Arizona's really struggling. They've been having some real struggles. They're another one. They dropped 6 last week. Watch out, because their season's not going to get any easier, especially Saturday when they take on BYU, who already sits ahead of them. So, we'll see what happens with Coach Lloyd or Coach Tommy and the boys.
Yeah. Excuse me. Ooh. My big surprise, I just have, I mean, really the Patinos, both of them. Look, I know there was a lot of talk about St. John's and Rick Pitino going there, and everyone I think just immediately figured, oh, this team is going to automatically be a national contender because Pitino's there. But I mean, we've seen plenty of coaches go there with maybe not the same, name value as Pitino, but very, very much with the same kind of pedigree. And he's got St. John's in a very good position. You kind of talked about them as a dark horse, definitely, and really one of the best teams in the Big East, which, full disclosure, the Big East is not having a great year when, UConn, the big boy, is kind of out of it. And then, Villanova's never really gotten off the ground. Kyle Neptune, enjoy yourself, but I don't know how long he has, but I'm getting off topic. In terms of my disappointments, unfortunately, I felt like there were more fruit to grab here, and Kansas was one of them for me. And look, Kansas more than likely going to the tournament. The other two teams I'm talking about, probably not. But Kansas, as you said, number one overall, and maybe even a little deeper dive. I don't know if I've seen a player regress in college the way Hunter Dickinson has regressed. I mean, I thought he was going to be a game changer when he transferred from Michigan to Kansas, 2 or 3 years ago. And I don't want to say he's been a detriment, but he's certainly brought nothing, at least in terms of success. So that's been a big disappointment for me. Another blue blood is North Carolina, and they not only have they been a disappointment, but the first time I really got to watch North Carolina this year was a few weeks ago when they played Duke. I was really excited for that game, and holy cow, Duke dog walked them. And North Carolina just, again, I don't know if it's just as kind of Danny Hurley talked about, kids have checked out or things like that, but just really lazy basketball. Now, North Carolina, I think it was 18-11. Oh, I don't have them up anymore. So they're, it's not a guarantee that they're not going to make it, but the next team I'm going to talk about definitely not going to make it unless they win the conference tournament, and it's Rutgers. Rutgers has to be the biggest disappointment of the year. This is a team that brought in the top 2 players recruiting-wise. I believe they were ranked number 9 to start the year. And they are 13-14, had to eke out an overtime win over Washington in their last game. Dylan Harper looks like he's going to be good at the next level. The only problem is he's going to the next level. That's the problem these days with one and dones, especially at these small schools. Like, if Rutgers was going to be successful, it was going to be right now when you have the top 2 freshmen, or at least rated wise, and it hasn't worked out. And that's a tough one for me. I really expected more out of Rutgers, and for them to be 13-14, that's unbelievable. Especially in a Big East that I felt like was going to be theirs for the taking, or at least there to compete in, and they have been actually, I am 5 years too late. Rutgers is in the Big Ten now that I think about it. But anyways, they still wouldn't have been a factor in the Big East. But anyway, realignment still got me, even though Rutgers got there 10 years ago. But it's been, I feel like, more easier to find disappointments this year than surprises, because again, I just think there's been a lot of chalk. And I didn't shout out the other Pitino. I'm sorry. Rich Pitino out at New Mexico. I'll get a little deeper into them when I get into the Mountain West report, but they have been on a fantastic tear. And look like they're going to be heading to the NCAA tournament. That would be a very fun tournament game if we see St. John's and New Mexico, but that'll be for another day. Time to dive into the team and conference reports. Raider Jim, as always, your jurisdiction. You got the West Coast Conference and the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Mr. Martinez, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, and I left Gonzaga off my list of who's disappointing me this year. And because, quite honestly, I'm disappointed at their ranking. I'm not that disappointed in the team. Why is Gonzaga 21-7? Why did they drop out of the top 20 for the first time since 1999, I believe it is? It's the first time we've seen them drop this far out of the rankings. They are 21-7 overall. They're 12-3 in the West Coast Conference. Losses have included West Virginia, who West Virginia is actually taking care of business against a couple ranked teams this year. So, good for them if that's their, victories that keep their season together for them. Good for West Virginia. They also lost to Kentucky. They lost to UConn early on, and they lost a close one to UCLA. The ones that really hurt are those conference losses where they lost to Oregon State and Santa Clara back to back. And I think by a total of 4 points or something like that. And then, of course, they lost to St. Mary's in their first battle, and they've got to make that up. It's St. Mary's conference to lose at this point. But what's going on with the Gonzaga Bulldogs? This is what you're seeing. This is the end result of what happens when you finally lose a Drew Timme and you finally lose an Anton Watson. If you think those two big bodies didn't bring a lot to the floor each and every season that they were there through the COVID year and the extension year and all that, you're mighty wrong. And also the transfer portal. Sometimes it works out real good, sometimes not so much. The Zags are not as well-rounded as they have been for many, many, many years. They don't have somebody that's going out there and nationally people are looking at them going, holy crap, look at that guy. Graham Ike is the big guy right now. He's he is averaging 16 points a game to lead the team. Khalif Battle, also good. 12 points a game is his average. Brandon Huff, a big kid at 11 points a game. Nolan Hickman, Ryan Emhart, you couldn't have a better backcourt than those two guys. Both of them very, very good. Both of them, not surprisingly, averaging 11. But there were times when Gonzaga hit the floor last year and a few years before that, going back even, they would have 6 to 8 guys averaging in double figures. They don't have that this year. They have the 5 guys averaging in double figures, and nobody's hitting close to 20 on the average. Ben Gregg, their big senior forward, he's only hitting 9.7 right now. Michael Ajayi, the transfer from Pepperdine, shot lights out for Pepperdine, shot lights out in the West Coast Conference. He's only averaging 7 points for the Zags this year. And Dusty Stromer, the hotshot sophomore from Sherman Oaks, he's only averaging 5 points. Very inconsistent with his 3-point shots, etc. Now, what does all that mean? It means that on the surface, when they said Ajayi is transferring from Pepperdine, going to be on Gonzaga, watch out. That's a lot of firepower. Watch the points really go up here. Didn't happen. It's not happening. Dusty Stromer, same thing. It's not happening. The concern is Stromer going to hang around as a sophomore, or is he going to say, maybe I'll go elsewhere? This is where the transfer portal, NIL, and all that is going to affect not only the big schools, but the big mid-majors like the Gonzagas, who next year, let's think about it, they're struggling their last year in the WCC. They're moving on. It's not going to get any easier for them next year. So does Dusty Stromer want to hang around? Does Ajayi want to hang around? Who knows? And we'll see. But again, you're starting to see what happens with all the breakups of the conferences, the transfer portal, the NIL, and guys that are going to get paid. The road for Gonzaga after the season is just going to get rougher and tougher, and they're really going to have to fight to keep their name in the top 20 and to be that national presence that they've become. Now, the big game again in the West Coast Conference, Saturday, St. Mary's is a home game for the Zags. That's a good thing. We'll see what they do. Again, that 4-point loss a few weeks back, that was a tough one, but at the same time, I don't think it made any statements on the St. Mary's side where Gonzaga feels like they can't right the ship and pull one step closer. They played third place USF, University of San Francisco, the other night, took care of business handily, and then they played Washington State, I believe it was yesterday, and they also took care of business. So Zags aren't out of it. The Zags will get into the tournament. If they do, look for them to be somewhere between 9, 10, or 11, I hope. A lot of that is going to depend on how well they take care of business against St. Mary's. And now this is going to lead me on. Let me pull out my soapbox. And even at my height, when I step on the soapbox, you don't know that I'm standing on a soapbox because I'm just too damn short. But You heard me say many times last year when Gonzaga stayed in the top 20 the entire season, and I'd see the risings and the drops in the different top 20 rankings. And I remember being just questioning week in and week out. And I am a big fan of Tom Izzo, big fan of Coach Izzo. But why with 7 losses was Izzo consistently in the top 20? And why is Gonzaga at 21-7 not in the top 20? And I get it. Well, the Kimpom and the art, all the other blah 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 blah. Yeah. Kansas is still in the top 20, and Kansas their record is dropping. And then more insulting, why isn't St. Mary's in the top 20? Yeah. I think they finally broke through in the coaches poll. I don't believe they have in the AP yet. St. Mary's is 24-4, 14-1 in conference play. And that's just disrespect. So to Coach Bennett, to St. Mary's, you guys are getting screwed. I don't care what anybody says. Arizona, the way they've been playing, they're still in the top 20, but St. Mary's isn't. Don't think I like that. But we'll see. Now it's up to St. Mary's and Gonzaga to go out and continue making names for themselves and represent the West Coast Conference. Again, Zag's got to play hard the rest of the stretch, and they've got to – you almost have to say that they've got to win that West Coast Conference tournament to be guaranteed anything at a 10 or below, and they could very well be left at the play-in game if they can't do that. So we'll see what happens from here on out. It would be a rough thing for old Raider Jim to see, scenes as they have not been out of the tournament since they made it back in 1998-99.
That's incredible. It's very difficult to fathom. It's hard sometimes people are like, oh, it's the first time it's happened since 2019. I'm like, that's not that. It was like 2 years ago. I'm like, oh no, that was 6 years ago. It's 2025 now. But 1999, that will get your attention. You start with the 19. That's going to be very impressive. It's funny you kind of mentioned the play-in game because, obviously my side of things, I have San Diego State in the Mountain West, and starting off with San Diego State, currently they are firmly right on the bubble. They would be the kind of more than likely, if they were going to get in, they would probably be a play-in game tournament type stuff, or not tournament, excuse me, play-in game on that Tuesday or Wednesday night to get in for that 11 seed, which I can't remember. I do remember, I want to say in the early stages of the expansion of the play-in games to the 11s, I do think San Diego State played in one, but it's been quite a long time. San Diego State overall, as I pull up, I didn't have their record written down. It's 18-6. They have some good wins overall. By far, their best one was a win over Houston, an overtime win. I believe that was in Vegas. That was all the way back in late November. So, it's not like, oh, this team, beat the number 5. They did. But at the time, Houston was number 6. But anyone will tell you the difference between a February and March team compared to November, very different. But that is on their resume. Unfortunately, I think they do have some kind of very unfortunate losses. One that is going to jump out to me, I would say UNLV and Colorado State. UNLV was at home. Colorado State's having a good year, but not at the level I think that the national, or at least the committee wants to see that loss, so that may go down as a bad loss. They also have lost to New Mexico and Utah State, but as I'll get into, that's not anything that's going to, sound any crazy alarm buttons. But San Diego State firmly on the bubble. They have 5 games left, a huge one. The next 2, really, I should say the next 2 games, massive, at Utah State and home Tuesday, February 25th. Against New Mexico. That's going to be a massive showdown. Both of those games going to be must watch and huge for San Diego State. Going to help their resume because this is more than likely going to be one of the most important conference tournaments for San Diego State in quite some time. Conference tournaments have always been important for San Diego State, but it's been more important for seeding it's not really, most of the time San Diego State goes to Vegas in the tournament knowing we're pretty much locked in. Not this year. So they're going to have a really solid finish and probably win a few games in the conference tournament to really feel comfortable to not play that play-in game. I mean, if they could go 2-0 against Utah State and New Mexico, I think that you kind of do take a deep breath. You still might need to do some stuff, but an 0-2 or 1-1, and I think there's still work that needs to be done there. Now, the Mountain West as a whole, as I pull this up, obviously, as I mentioned, is pretty much at the moment, it's New Mexico's to lose. They do have a slight one-game lead over Utah State, but New Mexico 22-5 overall, 14-2 in the conference. Ironically, Utah State is 23-4, 13-3 in the conference. They actually have a better net ranking, which is, we used to call it the RPI, or at least that was the end-all be-all was the RPI. It is now the net. So they actually have a net of 34, which is comfortably in the tournament currently. New Mexico at 41, kind of on the bubble. And then you have San Diego State coming in at third, 11-4, 2.5 games out of that first place spot. They're 18-6 overall with a net ranking of 49. Colorado State, that team I talked about, having a good year, but again, with a net ranking of 68, that's not going to go down as, maybe not a bad loss, but definitely not a good win, or a good loss, I should say. Boise State, 10-5, had a very good year, 18-8 overall with a net ranking of 46. And then the others, those are the 5 that I think have a shot, even though Colorado State probably not that large contender, but I do think those 5 teams can really contend for the conference title, or conference tournament title, I should say. UNLV 8-7, having an okay year, but they've actually had a much better conference year than a non-conference. They were terrible in the non-conference. Then you have Nevada, Wyoming, San Jose State, and then I mean it's really rough at the bottom of this conference when you look at 1-15 Fresno State and 0-15 Air Force. A combined 8 wins overall between those two schools. Currently, both of those teams long losing streaks. 16 for Air Force and 9 for Fresno State. Obviously, not college powers or basketball powers, but goodness gracious, that's a tough look at the bottom of this conference. But overall, I think you're going to see 3 teams make it in. I think Utah State, New Mexico, and whoever performs the best between San Diego State and Boise State, and then Colorado State really needs to get a lot of help. So that's just kind of my forecast, as we're 6 weeks out from Selection Sunday, or at least thereabouts. It's going to be interesting to see how it all kind of shakes out when it's all said and done, and we shall see how the Mountain West does finish up, but I do expect New Mexico to win the regular season, but then all bets are off as we head to conference tournament time. We'll see. Hopefully we can see San Diego State give me a little less heartburn, because I do not want to deal with a play-in game, just like Raider Jim does not want to deal with a play-in game.
Nope.
No thank you.
And you made a comment. You said when you talk about last time this happened was 2018, 19, going back, and that's 6 years ago. But when you start saying 19 something, to add to that and really, really emphasize what Gonzaga has done, the entire lineup was not born when Matt Santangelo led those guys to the Cinderella year.
Yeah. You could probably, I would venture to guess there's probably 80 to 85% of college athletes, or at least college basketball athletes, that were not alive. That is incredible. But again, it speaks to what Mark Few has built and
Correct.
continued to have. I mean, we've seen some of the biggest blue bloods out there. They missed tournaments once or twice, in a 5-year span. Gonzaga, not so much. Continue to dominate. But we'll see how this season, and who knows, maybe it works out for the Bulldogs, that they are a bit of a kind of discounted, if you will. But moving on to the second to last segment of the show, it is the switching it up a little bit. I think we did a little bit last year, but this year doing the full kit and caboodle of putting a conference spotlight, some of the low majors. Look, we all know Missouri Valley, Mountain West, WCC, things like that. But look, when Selection Sunday rolls around, there's going to be a low major that takes that becomes a Cinderella. It's just guaranteed. The hardest part is finding that one. So in an effort to try and find that, we're going to shine a spotlight this week on the Big West. Now, a little deep dive into my mind. A little selfishly, I picked the Big West because, goodness gracious, there's a heck of a story locally here going on in that Big West. The UCSD Tritons, 22-4 on the year. Fantastic season for them. But Raider Jim, your thoughts on the Big West?
Well, I liked them last year. I think you and I both liked them last year and even the year before. And then they started doing this, their own tournament in November where they invite 4 teams in. And you and I have said, let's make it more like a Maui Invitational where every year you bring in these nationally ranked teams with the understanding or the contingency that UCSD is going to be one of the teams that gets to compete in the tournament. And I think they're making a real statement here for that. They've got 3 great players. Unfortunately, they're all seniors. The kid that's leading the pack right now is this 6'6" senior, Ani Wanawa. Tate Jones averaging 19.8 a game. Tyler McGee averaging 16.8 a game. And local hometown boy Hayden Gray, a San Diego native out of Santa Fe Christian. And again, they are leading the way for these guys, but unfortunately, all 3 seniors will be interesting to see how they fill in the gaps. But hey, if San Diego State isn't dominating, or if San Diego State only has X amount of scholarships, don't be surprised to see the Tritons pick up a few players here and there from the transfer portal. Or, anything can happen. Anything can happen. But UCSD, nothing to sneeze at when it comes to education. And they have really made a statement with the basketball program. I think that they are second to them right now is UC Irvine, the old Anteaters, but they've already taken care of business against the Anteaters, and then they took care of business against Riverside. And the rest of the schedule here on out is actually very favorable for UCSD. So watch for the Tritons to finish number 1 and to be top seed in their Big West tournament. Wouldn't that be something to see them make a run?
Yeah, excuse me, I'm just looking over their schedule. I knew they had a big win. And it might not have been as big as I thought, but look, a win on the road at Utah State. I just got done kind of talking about Utah State, a tournament team. They get that win. And you did mention, UC Irvine, obviously a fantastic mascot too. The Anteaters, what a mascot there. But this is a conference right now that is very top heavy. With a net of 42, UCSD is, with the name value, I don't know if an at-large is there, just again, because if your best win is Utah State, which is great here on the West Coast, but I think nationally that's still kind of But, I think it's no, it's definitely not Doug Gottlieb anymore. But someone puts out each week they put out their projected bracket, and UCSD was projected to be a 12 seed. Nice. So that's huge for them. A 12 seed, an opportunity to take a bite out of that 5-12 matchup. We always get 1 12 seed. Why not UCSD if they do get that job done? But as you mentioned, this is a 1-bid league, and it's going to more than likely come down to that Big West tournament championship game. And you would have to imagine it's UCSD, UC Irvine. One of those teams is going in to the tournament, and the other probably going to the NIT, which is nothing to sneeze about for these programs, trust me. And might maybe even want to make the case that NIT, they got a better shot of winning that. But I do think, because you look at Cal State Northridge and UC Riverside having good years, but they're not anywhere near that net ranking of where you want to be for an at-large. And even you see Irvine at 22-4, a net ranking of 60. That's not going to get the job done. But UCSD, I'm so used to, if I'm talking about positive for a San Diego basketball team, I'm so used to saying San Diego State. I'm going to have to change that. UCSD not only has been a power at I don't know if it was, I think it was D2 or maybe it was NAIA. I'm not sure, but they were a power at that level and then have since moved up here. I love the Maui invitation. Excuse me, that Maui invitational idea, because with all due respect to Chaminade, I mean, Chaminade's what, a D2 or D3 school? And I know they're not in that tournament anymore, but I mean, to have a true D1 school do that, and be able to host that against some of the blue bloods, and who knows? I mean, Michigan, I'm sure would love to get out to the West Coast for Thanksgiving and not be in 10 degrees or whatever it is there in Ann Arbor. But it's going to be very, very interesting to see how this Big West rolls out. But I just think, with all due respect to everyone else, maybe we can just have these two teams play a best of 7, and then the winner goes to the tournament for the next 3 weeks. And then also, I did just kind of do the math in my head. We are not 6 weeks away from Selection Sunday. I think we're closer to 6 weeks away from the national championship. Again, mind a little bit behind because of football, but I think we're about 2 or 3 weeks away from
I think we're 3 to 4 weeks, because I'm looking at the Big West Conference tournament, and it is going to be March 12th through the 15th, which is just a couple weeks away.
Yeah. And actually, now that I think about it, the 20th of March is going to be the first Thursday of college basketball, because I actually just requested it off. So it will be that Sunday before that. I'm sure there's some mathematicians that can fill in the blanks for me there, because we'll be here all day if I try to do that. So, but moving on to our final segment, as always, kind of looking ahead to the big games of the week and weekend. And when I put these together, I do filter by top 25, because it's just so difficult to go through every single game by day. So there are, as Raider Jim kind of mentioned, Gonzaga, St. Mary's, even what I've talked about, San Diego State, New Mexico, San Diego State, Utah State. There are also big games as well. These are just the ones, again, for time's sake, when I'm going through them, I have to kind of even it out a little bit. But starting off on Saturday, this will be February 22nd, a huge matchup in the SEC. Number 6, Tennessee, number 9, Texas A&M. Oregon will head to number 11, Wisconsin. Maybe the game of the weekend, Iowa State, number 8, at number 5, Houston. Number 17, Kentucky, at number 4, Alabama. Number 3, Duke, at Illinois. And then BYU at number 19, Arizona. Sunday, we've already mentioned the St. John's UConn game. That'll be UConn at number 10, St. John's. Purdue, number 13 in the country. Still having plenty of success without the big guy. At Indiana. Nice little rivalry game there. Monday, we are going to have Houston again, a bit of a gauntlet for the Cougars. They're number 5, and they will be at number 9, Texas Tech. Tuesday, number 21, Mississippi State. Good to see they've joined the party. They're at number 4, Alabama. And then Tennessee, number 6 in the country, at one of the few non-ranked SEC teams, LSU. And then finally, next Wednesday, number 14, Michigan State, at number 20, Maryland. Ole Miss at number 1, Auburn. Vanderbilt, who's had a good little season. They're not ranked, but they've had a good season for their standards. They'll be at number 7, Texas A&M. And then number 17, Kentucky, another tough one as they head to Norman to face Oklahoma. And finally, in the Big 12, Utah at Arizona. Arizona ranked number 19 in the country. Raider Jim, your thoughts or any of these games you're looking forward to, or any others I missed?
Oh, I'm really interested to see what happens with BYU and Arizona. Arizona is going to be playing for their lives, because both games that have implications here in the conference are going to be that game, Iowa State and Houston. If Iowa State can pull off the upset, and if BYU can take care of business against Arizona, that's going to make life real tough for the Wildcats. So we'll see what happens there. And of course, Sunday, can't wait to see what happens in Madison Square Garden when UConn hits the floor against St. John's. But I think I already know what's going to happen there. I would definitely look at St. John's on that and the point spread. Houston, Texas Tech on Monday. That's going to be a good one too. I can't wait to see what happens with that one. Again, let's see where Houston stands come Monday, because they're going to have a real fight on their hands on Saturday against Iowa State. And to have to turn around after just 1 day's rest and take on the likes of Texas Tech, wow, their schedule's not getting any easier. And of course, Gonzaga, St. Mary's, let's see what happens there.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see Iowa State. I'm going to get 2 very good opportunities, and Houston as well. I'm sorry, only 1 opportunity for Iowa State, but 2 for Houston, just because, again, like just kind of getting myself caught up on everything that's going on, kind of been watching from afar. But to see these teams actually out there and getting after it, and Houston, as you mentioned, I mean, if they go 2-0 here, they have a firm inside track for a 1 seed if they can continue to do what they need to do. Because for a lot of these teams at this point, that's what it's about now. It is about seeding. It's about getting as close to that 1 seed, if not getting that 1 seed. You mentioned BYU, Arizona. I think this is a very dangerous game for Arizona. BYU is a very good team, very talented team. And when you get to this point of the season, very similar to Vanderbilt and Texas A&M, these teams are looking for scalps. And look, I don't know if BYU is going to make the tournament. I haven't seen their net or anything like that, but I saw them early in the season. I like their athleticism. But the one thing I will say is for BYU, a loss at Arizona, that's not devastating, right? Arizona, a home loss to BYU, again, I don't think it tumbles them out of the tournament, but it might drop them down 1 or 2 seeds. So a lot of pressure on Arizona. And then again, I kind of put that into the Texas A&M Vanderbilt game, because Vanderbilt, again, this is another team. I know they have at least 2 upsets this year. Again, I don't know how everything else has gone, but a team that can at the very least shock some people if given that opportunity. But that Monday night standalone game with Houston, Texas Tech, in-state rivalry, Texas Tech's been a big surprise for me, at least. So very interesting really to see how all this shakes out. And I mean, it's been a great season so far, but for me to now finally focus fully on this, fantastic, and a great week of basketball to ingest. And really, I mean, this is the best time for college basketball, for being honest, as we get closer to conference tournaments. And of course, the big one, March Madness. But Raider Jim, your final thoughts for this episode of In the Paint?
Yeah, great to be back talking college basketball. Or kind of like riding a bike. You know, we hadn't done it in a while, but once we started, we just, I guess we were pedaling downhill and didn't fall off. So we're doing pretty good. Final thought for me is that I hope that what I'm seeing with Gonzaga and some of the other programs is not what I have feared as far as the breaking up of conferences, the diluting of conferences. Was it the SEC that's got all the teams? Big 12 has so many teams already in there. And it's kind of like college football. Is it going to end up being where it's kind of lopsided and only a few people are really going to have, you might invite 64, you might invite 80, but when it comes right down to it, there's going to be 10 that are worth anything in that horse race. I hope that's not what's happening. I wish some of these changes never took place. I like it when you have the same kids on the same team for their entire college careers, but I know that's not the way life is anymore. We're in the world of immediate need, and I want it now. And if I don't like it, then I'm just going to go somewhere else. And it's too bad. I just hope it doesn't impact college sports too much. That you've said it, I've said it, coaches said it, and I think we all have a somewhat similar outlook on that topic.
Yeah. For me, I got 2 final thoughts, which is a little contradictory, but over here on my computer, seeing USA, Canada about ready to play hockey, and by the time this goes out, the game will be done and dusted, and hopefully, of course, the Americans get the job done. But this tournament, the 4 nations, and again, unfortunately, if this is the first you're hearing about it, you're too late because the game's already over. But this tournament has been great. And a lot of what it's done is I've seen today in the last few days, a lot of movie moments for me, maybe possibly one of the greatest sports movies ever made. And this is kind of a call to everyone out there. If you have not seen Miracle, it is an opportunity. You should definitely go see it. Family friendly. Believe me, if you're a Disney movie, you have to be fantastic for me to recommend that to you. But it is a fantastic movie. I mean, it's about a fantastic story, obviously, the Miracle on Ice. And no matter what happens tonight, this will not be a Miracle on Ice if the U.S. wins by that standard. But just an opportunity, again, if you haven't seen that movie, you really, really should. It is really one of the best sports movies ever made. And my final thought is going back, about 2 months ago. Actually, let's go back to last Selection Sunday. Unfortunately, we did get a little bit of unfortunate foreshadowing when the selection show started, and we did not see Greg Gumbel at the top of that desk, as we have essentially for in my entire life, and most of y'all's as well. And unfortunately, his health had taken a turn. He wasn't able to be there. And this past December, I believe it was December 27th, Greg Gumbel did pass away. And after 50 years essentially calling everything, I guarantee you can find a Greg Gumbel call of pretty much any sport, and it's all at the top level. He was college basketball for me. Selection Sunday will never be the same. And, I guess selfishly, it would have been great to see him one last time or have a little send off. And that wasn't the case. But again, with college basketball becoming forefront into my mind, I wanted to bring it up when it happened. And then, of course, my low intelligence, you get one stat and that seeps out of the backside of my brain, unfortunately. But wanted to make sure I really did give that shout out to Greg Gumbel. Everyone already has 50 years. I don't think there's a single person out there that has anything negative to truly say about him. He will be missed. He is missed. And I think it's going to be really tough on Selection Sunday when it's not him. And that we had it last year, but it wasn't the finality of it. And unfortunately this year we will, but I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Raider Jim, but
no, but as you brought that up and reminded me, yeah, he will not be here. And when games start and the horn goes, we also won't be, of course. I don't think we're going to be seeing Dickie V again, and we aren't going to be seeing the big man from San Diego, Bill Walton. And that's those are three pretty big voids to fill when it comes to calling college basketball games.
Yeah, well, Dickie V's back. He's back to college.
Is he back? Okay,
yeah, he is back. But yeah, unfortunately, the Bill Walton thing, and the other thing too, I've been doing maybe a little background at looking into some long form videos. But yeah, I was doing some deep dive into the Donald Sterling saga, and I thought I was going to do a video on the V. Stiviano situation. Then I did some background, and I said I think the juicy stuff is actually the stuff that happened in San Diego. So keep an eye out on that with Bill Walton and stuff like that. Very interesting there. But yeah, very unfortunate with Greg Gumbel. And as we said, our Selection Sunday will never be the same again, but thoughts and prayers out to his friends and family, and will definitely and is missed. But with that being said, thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the In the Paint podcast, presented by the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. It is time for you all to go wash your hands and stop hating everybody. We'll talk to you all very soon. Take care.